Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Versus Stars podcast, third season. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. This is an amazing episode because JayDee Rosario boards the mothership to discuss New York versus the world. Now, come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Rosario. Thanks so much for coming to Versus Stars podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Mr. Haas. How you doing?
It's so my pleasure to have you on. So, I always start off with the question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for comics and who are your earliest influences?
So what inspired my love for comic books? My parents. Right? If I could get emotional or excuse me, personal for a second. My dad was the first one to introduce me to comic books. Unfortunately, he passed away when he was very young. I was young too. I was 6 years old when we lost him. And my mom kept my passion for comic books growing because she found that I was reading. I wasn't reading the books that was being given to me in school. Um, but you put a comic book in front of me and I was going back and forth cover to cover. And it also kept me from being an knucklehead on the streets. So I was home reading. So she encouraged that. So those were my biggest ways into comic books. My biggest inspirations for books, dude. Man, I am all over the place. It's like it doesn't come from one sole person, right? I cherry pick a lot of folks. Like Jose Luis Garcia Lopez was my introduction to DC superheroes. He drew the style guide for DC comic books. So his influence on the blue and gray Batman is big, and Shazam. I'm sorry, I can't call him Captain Marvel. I'm always going to call him Shazam. And those style guys, those turnarounds had a big influence on me. The early Kerwin Dwyer or Mark Greenwald Captain America issues from those 300s onto the 350s. Well, excuse me, early for me. Those are early 80s books. Um, was a huge influence on me. Those were the first books that I was able to get consecutively and not in a comic shop, right? I didn't have comic book shops around where I was at in Brooklyn. Well, there were some direct market shops. They were pretty far from where we're at. I was picking up my books at a corner bodega, and or the Walden Books, which was an older bookstore in the mall, off the spinner rack. So that was the book that I was getting consecutively. So that superhero presence uh was big right from the beginning, and then you hear different things about different characters and the behind the story stuff. So there's so many different creators that influence the way I design things, come up with things, start to create a story. So I can't just say it's just one. But if they came out of the 80s, yeah, that was pretty much someone who influenced me in my work.
So, your current comic is the third issue of New York versus the World, which is a great series.
Thank you.
So, how has the series evolved since the first issue, and what have you learned since starting the series?
All right, how has the series evolved? Well, I understood what the core of the series was. I went into it just making a good zombie book, right? But when you look at some of the good zombie stories or movies, there's always an underlying message. That very first one that was a black and white that dealt with racism. That the second one in the mall, the second one that I saw, excuse me, the Dawn of the Dead in excuse me, Day of the Dead. There's so many of the deads, I keep forgetting which one is which.
Yeah,
But the one that was in the mall, was
I
dealing
think
with
I think it's Dawn
capitalism.
of the Dead.
It was Dawn of the Dead, right? So Day of the Dead was the first one in black and white.
Night of the Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead,
Not,
Dawn of the Living Dead. I think then Day of the Living Dead.
I had this thing the other day where I thought Night of the Creeps was something else. I thought it was Slither, but it ended up being Night of the Creeps. I don't know if you remember Night of the Creeps.
No, I don't know that one.
Ooh! So Night of the Creeps was the outer space slugs that was turning people into zombies,
Oh,
and they hit a bunch of guys on prom night that was going to the sorority. So you had people in real tacky 1980s, prom jumpsuits, or tuxedo shirts in zombie form. It was weird. So anyway, so I'm always confusing the names of the movies, but I know what was what. So those underlying messages, they carried something. When it comes to New York versus the world, for me, that's the story of folks dealing with xenophobia, right? And the whole anti-immigrant stance. So New York City is the last safe place in the world, because I have a chip on my shoulder when I heard, New York will never survive the zombie apocalypse. Well, I'm going to show you how. And what they did was they blew the bridges and they flooded the tunnels. And it took them 15 years to clean out the city. But once they did, they started to let people in. And now they're worried, can they trust those that are coming in, right? Or can they look at them with some sort of, well, elitism, as if you didn't clean up this place the way I did.
Hmm.
So when you look at what's going on here in the States with the whole anti-immigration uproar, fervor, and the whole build the wall scenario, what happens when you have one group of people on this side of the wall that are looking to keep their family safe, and
Right.
another group of people on the other side of the wall, excuse me, that are looking for a safe place to keep their family, right? You wrap that all up in a zombie package and you can explore a ton of different ideas. So that's what I learned, is what the core of this story was about and how to build off of it. So in this, I think I mentioned this in a show that you and I were hanging out on. Um, from the Star Trek philosophy, if you're the red shirt in my book,
Yeah.
you got a better chance at surviving than the protagonist or the antagonist, right? Because the true main character of this story is New York City.
Hmm.
In the first one, we're dealing with an event that happens around Ellis Island. The second one, we're dealing around an event that happens at Coney Island. And this one, we're utilizing the Brooklyn Bridge as the backdrop, as the backdrop for the majority of the story. So, being able to play in the areas that I grew up is the fun part of this.
Now, obviously, like you said, they flooded the tunnels, they destroyed the bridges, so nothing else can get in. But because these are zombies, and I am assuming these are the old school concept of the zombies, which are when you die, you come back to life.
Yeah.
What do they do? Because people are still going to die within the city, and I assume they will immediately become zombies. So how do they deal with the problem internally?
All right. So that's the fun of playing with the five different boroughs of New York City. Um, if you're familiar with the area at all, you know that Staten Island used to be known as the dump. That's where sanitation would dump their garbage. That's where they're taking their dead bodies, right? We're playing with some of the elements of mythology and old lore with Charon and the River Styx as well.
Yeah.
So if you ever saw the images of the big garbage scows floating up and down the Hudson, they don't carry garbage anymore. They're transporting the dead bodies,
Hmm.
right, from the city over to Staten Island, or picking up any floaters before they come up on the shore. So we play with elements like that. What you thought you may have known in the city prior to the apocalypse, well, it still carries that name, but it's a totally different task behind it.
Now, with zombies as well, in zombie lore, you have your Romero zombies, you have your 28 Days Later zombies,
Yeah,
fast, slow zombie, things of that nature. Where do you fall on the zombie debate in your comic?
I'm falling more into the Romero zombies, but leaning to the environment of 1970s um, uh, grindhouse films like Escape from New York or The Warriors. So you have that extra bit of urban decay wrapped around that. Yeah, I like the 28 Day Zombies, or even the Snyder running zombies as well. They find their place in there, but I I'm a bit of a classical person, I
The
guess.
one interesting thing they did, well, at least Romero did, it's kind of interesting, though maybe debatable, is that he sort of developed the zombies evolved over time until they were technically there was actually some sort of semi-smart zombie. I can't remember the name. There was like that one zombie who literally picked up a gun at some point, and they had
Yeah.
a marching through the water underneath the water, stuff like that. Where are we again on the zombie debate with where Romero eventually took his zombies?
Yeah, we're not that far at all. We're definitely not that far. And I'm taking my own turn into this. I don't want to you know divulge too much, but I have my own take on how they're getting around. And it's not through sight, it's not through smell, it's not through taste. We're dealing with the major organ in the body and how that is the only thing that is still visibly presentable, no matter how dry it should be. And that is the sensation that they're utilizing to get through the city, or yeah. I play it off of their skin. Let me just put it out there, right? I play it
Yeah.
off the skin, and I play off the skin as if it's the whiskers on a cat or something like that, right? And it's the sensations, whether it's in the air, the movement, sound can infect a touch as well. So that's what drives them, not the hearing, because uh, if you explore that logically, right? Well, that will just melt away. What are they consuming, right, to sustain them? But you always see skin on them,
Yeah.
right? So how do we use that? How do we use touch as our strongest sensation? You get hurt, right? That sore spot is the most sensitive area on your entire body. So what is it if you're a dead person, but your entire body is this one big sore?
Mm.
How sensitive is it? Right? Is it sensitive to pick up sound a block away, half a foot away? Right? Is it sensitive to pick up a gunshot from a rooftop to take in that location? So it's not sound specifically, it's touch being affected by that. So that's the area that I'm exploring.
I mean, is it sort of an echolocation kind of thing where, but instead of sonar, it's bouncing off the feel of waves on their skin?
Kind of, yeah, 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 yeah. Almost as if, right, you're going with echolocation like from a bat. So
Yeah.
imagine if the membrane on the wing is that piece that's picking up the sound from. Yeah, yeah,
Now, another interesting about the story is again dealing with zombies. I know another famous one is The Walking Dead, obviously with
yeah.
Robert Kirkman's story, where he never defines what actually triggered the zombie outbreak. Do we know what triggered the zombie outbreak in your world?
Do we know what triggered it? No. Do we know where it began? Yes. And going off of New York City, it is going to be explored, but we have something that was featured in the first Men in Black movie, right? And that Will's Fair area, and what happens when we get to explore that area, and why it's untouched by living people as well as the zombies.
Yeah, and I think another interesting about zombies, this is always kind of fascinated by the zombie stories, is that when introduced to that concept of zombies and the idea of the dead coming back to life,
Mm.
you would imagine, though it's usually not often discussed, that that would have a massive um, change in how people perceive the existence of the world around them. Just from the just for the fact that these things that were, basically it's a completely changing concept of what is out there. Because once again, something that's dead comes back to life. Portion of life, death, things of that nature. How does the existence of zombies ex existentially change people's perception of the world around them, but belief systems, things of that nature, because of
Oh, that's great, because that's technically what issue number 3 is starting to deal with, right? So one of the biggest aspects is that all life is precious,
Hmm.
right? No matter what they've done. So there's no prison system at all in this universe. Um, because it's precious, but they can't keep you with the regular, law-abiding citizens, those that are looking to keep life running. So how do they deal with that? And one of the ways I'm exploring is the concept of the thinner. And the thinner is someone who lives outside the city gates, right? And the other untamed boroughs, thinning out the herds of zombies before they reach the gates or the walls. So it's easier for them to manage. But they live out there, and they have to live a certain amount of time out there, the same way you do a prison sentence.
Hmm.
Some folks, that's it. That's where they want to be. So they will do whatever they can to stay out there. Some folks are trying to earn their way back in. Um, but now the other thing is there's no currency, right? The regular money is not worth it, but bartering. Can you bring a skill? How do you earn your way into the city?
Hmm.
Well, you earn your way out into the city by being a thinner as well. So what happens when you have a family man who's trying to buy safe passage into the city and has to earn that by being a thinner alongside the cannibal who has adjusted to this new way of life, living outside the city.
Mm,
And what happens when you bring them into conflict with each other with some of today's moral ideologies,
mm.
both on this side of the wall and on that side of the wall.
Now, is there from a perception standpoint of the people living there, do they view this as the dead are alive again? Like, how does it affect them from the point of view, let's say, religion and like spiritual concept of what the world looks like to them?
So
Does
with
that
space
fall
being
apart?
limited in New York City, all religion is pretty much in one center place of worship. Everybody else just has their own corner of the room to deal with that. For me, one of the perfect things is they don't have time to focus on the complexities of why I don't like this,
Mm.
right? The number one goal is to survive to the next day, be it by keeping safe from the zombies or by trying to, find your meal, trying to provide for your family on a day-to-day basis. So the first world problems that we deal with today are pretty much gone to the wayside. I show, from my opinion, how that stuff is really not as important as we think it is.
I agree with you 100% on that. Even now, I totally agree with you on that. But I always did wonder about, we watch a lot of these shows, it's like, well, you would think that a belief in something after basically an apocalypse would implode upon itself by that point. Because I was assuming that has not, because the whole idea is that when the bad things happen, all the good people got raptured up.
Yeah.
But at this point, clearly that did not occur when the apocalypse did hit. So you're kind of, you would assume it would all fall apart at that point, unless there's some really gullible people out there.
It's funny. They think the rapture is, the floating off into the heavens. The rapture could just be them getting eliminated in the first wave, right? It's how you interpret it. Um, with New York versus the world. Um, how do I put this? Living in New York City during the recent pandemic, you found that the things on a daily basis which were troubling you were not as important as making sure you had enough toilet paper to last a month, right? Your priorities shifted. So how do I take that which occurred here in the city, which I saw firsthand, and scale that up,
Hmm.
right? Or play that along the lines of what I'm trying to get to within the story of New York versus the world.
So who does the who? I know, I mean, obviously New York is like the main character. Who would you say this issue three is being told from the from the perspective of?
Okay, so we have two perspectives. We have one who was that the cannibal, the thinner who is out there that, you know what, he is adapted to this new life. And then the other one is the family man who is like, I just got to get through one more day. I got to get through one more day because if I can make it, well, then I don't got to worry about my wife and my kid ever having to see another day outside of the city walls.
Hmm.
So, how do you generate animosity between the two of them? You toss in some of today's xenophobic concepts and play that against each other. And you use the biggest catalyst of all, the lack of food,
Hmm.
the lack of available food, right? And how much of your want or your need for it would you risk your safety for?
Hmm. Now, I think this is your 23rd, 24th campaign you created.
Something like that. You lose track, dude. Yeah, but yeah, I've done a few. I've done quite a few.
So, what is your advice for how to create an actual successful campaign? Because this one's already been successful. You already hit your goal. If
We
I
hit the goal. We hit the goal because it's a black and white book. Um, my strategy for being an independent comic book creator is um not to make money in the campaign, but to cover my expenses as much as possible. Once we get our books printed up, then we utilize that at convention. Conventions are back again. That's where I made my bread and butter prior to the pandemic. That's where I'm coming back to making my bread and butter. So as long as I'm covering my expenses for the book and I could print up X amount of copies, that's where I make my money, right? Selling the ones that already been paid for because we're not generating the advertising revenue of the whole, right? I don't have any VC money behind me. I don't have any rich uncle supporting me. So through Kickstarter, even if I can generate half of what I need to get there, well, I was going to come out of pocket to pay for these books anyway. So if
Right.
I can minimize as many expenses as possible through these campaigns, that I have enough content, I have enough product, I have enough merch to keep the lights on. And I think I've been doing a pretty successful job of it over these years.
So, can for the listeners, what are some rewards for the backers that you're excited about? What are some stretch goals that are incoming?
All right, so stretch goals that are incoming. That is the fun way to stretch somebody's dollar, but try not to spend as many of my dollars as possible also, right? So shipping is a big factor. How do I add things into it that can minimize my shipping or keep my shipping expenses from raising? One of those things is trading cards, right? So trading cards and stickers are things that are going to be added to the campaign. I have a great trading card set that has been built up. That has been one of our things that we've built up over the years. We're always adding trading cards to our stretch goals, but not everybody's been with us since our first campaign. So if they want to, they can buy those previous trading cards that others have had access to if they want to. We leave that up there. But if not, well, they'll be getting their trading cards that have been unlocked with these goals. Uh, I didn't know people liked them as much as they still do. So that's fun with it. And I do have a few more things that I am holding into the back of my pocket because they have not arrived yet from China. But if my pins get here in time, then I'm gonna add that to the campaign, hopefully before the 11th hour. And they're all gonna be New York versus the War related. And again, that's a smaller thing, something I don't have to get a bigger shipping box for.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's along that concept. Um, Hopefully we get them in time so I can let them out. And if not, then we'll run another campaign for that later.
Now, one thing that I always I find times I find interesting, sometimes it's kind of flummox to me sometimes, is the route of publicity.
Yeah,
Now, obviously, it feels to me sometimes, and maybe I might be wrong, it might be just a bias because we all have our own bias, that social media has become more and more difficult to promote things on.
yeah,
I feel like the platforms are becoming more stringent about the amount of impressions you're allowed to get on anything you post, if it's
yeah.
marketing related. And I do find paying for marketing, like I've paid for Facebook ads, don't seem to have much pull. So, what is the pathway to properly market your book for Kickstarters at the indie level?
All right. To touch on Facebook ads for a second, I'm with you. I had stopped running Facebook ads 3 campaigns ago because I noticed the majority of my Facebook ads were going to Facebook Marketplace with the 60 and older crowd. Definitely not folks that were buying our books, even though I was utilizing the keywords or the terminology or their generative searches, or even people who liked my Facebook page and their friends to go beyond that, and it still wasn't targeting those that um I was looking for. There was a time where you could type in keywords on Facebook ads, right? Now it would just subgenres. So when the campaign started, I tried it again to see if things had gotten better since that point, and they've gotten worse. So
I agree. I did an ad for my current campaign, right?
yeah,
I think I didn't pay a lot, about 15 bucks for it. I got 600 likes on the
I
ad,
know,
zero backing from
I
it.
know, I know. And
Easy.
how many clicks? You're lucky if you got 6 to 10, right?
Right. I mean, I must admit, I think when I was looking at it, it literally, I don't think added, other than the likes, people clicked enough.
Yeah.
Nothing happened from it. It seemed like
Yeah,
the most worthless $15 I've ever spent.
I know. I did a little bit more than that. I think I did 100 for 5 days, and nothing. So that pissed me off. Yet the 100 that I spent on Backetkit helped me out. So you got the Backetkit launch, right? And one of the benefits of having done as many campaigns as I have is that I've had over 800 and something people support my campaigns. 800 different people support my campaigns. And you don't always have access to all of those people, right? But through Backetkit launch, you do. And I was able to reach some of them and I was still able to capture them. And the other thing has been my newsletter. I know a lot of people don't like to do conventions, but conventions, like I said, that's my bread and butter. And how I do things is I buy my books in bulk. I do offset printing. I don't do print on demand. And through offset printing, I can minimize my cost per unit. So now when I'm doing a convention and I want to capture someone's email, sign up for our email. Here's a free book. Well, you know what? That book just cost me 75 cents to get your email for a future sale.
Hmm.
There's nowhere in business that you can get a lead for 75 cents
Hmm.
anywhere. All right. Yeah. Are there other factors where, you got to divide, but, you got to, how many people signed up and the cost of your convention and the expenses? Yeah. That can raise your cost of acquisition per person. But I'm looking at it per unit, right? It cost me 75 cents in a comic book to get your email added to my newsletter where I can sell you future books of the ones that you like.
Hmm.
All right. One of my keys has been my diversity. I have had I have books in the supernatural genre, in the horror zombie genre, in the superhero genre, in the dark fantasy genre, in the fantasy genre. Excuse me, the action genre. I said fantasy with dark fantasy. But I've also had, source books, which also goes to those D&D and those role players or even the cosplayers. So I've got a very good and varied consumer base. So if we don't have one product that they like, we'll have something else that will capture interest and grow from there. Um, so that's been my key. You can't beat the long game,
Hmm.
plain and simple, right? But it takes time to develop the long game. Unfortunately, so many people are looking for those immediate results, and that will chase you out of this field very quickly. You got to understand it takes you how long to make the book to begin with. Sometimes, some folks, it's a month, some it's 3, some it's a year. So if it's taking you that long to make the book, don't expect the results within a 40-day campaign, right? Give it time, let it breathe.
Hmm. So for New York versus the World, between which dates is the third book running from?
So that is running from, I think it was April 11th to Saturday, May 12th. Or is it Saturday, May 11th?
It would be May 11th if it's Saturday.
So Saturday night, May 11th, she shuts down at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. If you check me out on Comic Book Streamland, we'll be having a closing live stream and running a trivia contest for that. Or you can go to the campaign itself and you'll see the YouTube live stream directly on the top of the story page. So I will have a number of people on there playing a trivia game, and each one of those folks will represent one random backer in the campaign. So if that person does good, then they'll win the grand prize, which is just something else that will be added to a physical backer's rewards. If it's a digital backer, then I have a nice little digital uh, compilation of books that they can be rewarded as well.
Very good, Mr. Rosario. It's been an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much. And guys, Back New York versus the World. It's a good book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Haas.
Have a good night.
Later, brother.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Versus Stars podcast. To tell me better the algorithms? By liking and subscribing. Sure to turn for the next episode when Jordan Hart and David Ebeltoft board the mothership to talk the cabinet from Image Comics. Till next voyage, travel on.